livelihoods are really dependent, perhaps, on which ranks they're going to one way or another. And I find that the aspect that really touches me at the very moment is, what do we mean by terror? And I want you to stop and think for a moment in yourself, what is terror? I was trying to look up some definitions of terrorism. I came across an article that was mind-blowing. Because if you look at how different countries like UK, France, Canada, and others define terrorism, you will not find any way of putting them together. Then you look at the EU definition of terrorism, and then you look at the UN definition of terrorism. Now, when you have a war on terror with armies coming from different countries, presumably one thinks that there is some sort of consensus about what terrorism is all about, and therefore what the war on terror is. But in my view, the real terror is not what the media are trying to portray, because so few journalists have been allowed on the ground, and also so little is known about Mali. Mali, until a couple of years ago, was a country that very few people knew. In this country, for example, in Anglophone countries where it was, there was an expression, I'm going to Timbuktu, to say, well, you're a bit funny, where are you going? Yeah. When I got married and then I got this research contract to go out to Mali and doing research north of Timbuktu, people were looking at me, in dismay, saying, well, this woman is a bit funny, isn't she? But in fact, Mali is often portrayed as one of the poorest countries in the world. The aid enterprise and industry has turned Mali into a little child in need of Western countries to feed its people, when in fact it is the second gold producer in the world after South Africa. Okay? So there are so many resources in Mali. It's just a matter of who is in control of those resources, how are they managed, and how are they distributed. I have a feeling that a large number of Western countries who are giving aid in Mali are actually giving aid because they want a return and want to keep a presence in the country. We also know, for your information, that the UK, for example, is one of the main country buyer of gold in Mali. There is a company called Anglo Gold that is operating in Mali. And we also know of a Human Rights Watch report that tells of the horrors of child labor exploitation to extract gold in Mali. If you look it up on the website, you will find it on the Human Rights Watch. This is all happening in the south of Mali. Then we have the north of Mali. The north of Mali is something of a mystery. It has always been. So very few explorers have made it up to that area. Let me just pull up some maps for you to give you an idea of what did we do in the end? Yeah, where I can't see the mouse on it. Where is the mouse? Okay, and I put it on slideshow. I did my field work, okay? This was my tent. This is where I spent 15 months roaming around with Tuareg people, following herds in different seasons of the years according to where the rain was dropping that 1 month a year, okay? And this has given me the great privilege and opportunity of living very closely with Tuareg people and try to understand what makes them so special in a way, so reserved and yet rich in culture. And why is it that they feel so different from other people in the south of the country? Of course, I worked in a rural area, not all Tuareg are nomadic herders. You have plenty of Tuareg who are integrated in the civil service in the government of Mali and who work in various ministries. They also teach in schools. So let's not get just a romantic picture of the Tuareg as being nomads. The Tuareg are very enterprising traders. More recently, they've also made their name in the world music market, and I think they're trying to reach out and crying out loud that unless something is done very quickly, they're going to be exterminated. This brings me back to my notion of terror. Okay, I think that terror has been perpetrated against the Tuareg from the time the French went into Mali. So in Timbuktu, for example, they arrived around 1894, okay? And that's when they started to impose French schooling to everybody, okay? That was the general colonial rule, because traditionally schools were led by Islamic clerics. And therefore, madrasas were seen as politically uncomfortable platforms through which the colonial power could be undermined. Therefore, French schooling was imposed to everyone. Most Tuareg rejected going to school, to French schools, and tried to continue moving around and living with their herds. Okay? When Mali became independent in the 1960s, the atrocities, the real atrocities and what I call terror actually began. Napalm gas was spread over nomadic camps, over civilian populations that didn't have any defense to protect themselves. And this continued. Wells were poisoned, water wells were poisoned. Whoever has had any experience of living in the desert will know that water is an essential resource for survival. And not just the survival of people, but also the survival of livestock, which allow people to live through their milk and meat and hides and everything else. During the 1990s, we also know of another terror operation perpetrated by the Malian army, which at the time was under the presidency of the last elected president of Mali, Amadou Toumani Touré, who at the time was an army general, a pushist who had overtaken the Malian government in 1990, and who had led this operation called Opération Kokadje, which means to clean up, whereby systematically and using lists of people, he started from the south of the country, and in each town, in each camp, where they had names of particularly good Tuareg, including civil servants who were working for the Malian government, they committed mass murders. And there are mass graves that have never been uncovered, that remain to this day to prove that the Tuareg were unjustly attacked and exterminated. This danger reappears now. This war is extremely complex to understand because of the little information we have, but also because it is unclear what is happening on the ground. I hope my friend Akli, who is a Tuareg from Libya, will be able to tell us more about this. My understanding is limited, even though I am in touch with a lot of Tuareg people. But from what I can understand, the danger of the Malian army with the French army taking over the north of the country has already given rise to extrajudicial executions. And the danger of them multiplying is extremely high, and something that everybody should be aware of. Now, I call that terror. I call that terror. But I want to end, just because I started with this, sharing with you two definitions of terrorism. The first one is the United Nations definition of terrorism. Criminal acts intended or calculated to provoke a state of terror in the general public. A group of persons or particular persons for political purposes are in any circumstances unjustifiable, whatever the consideration of a political, philosophical, ideological, racial,